But right now, some huge news when it comes to the NBA. Nick Nurse, the new head coach of the Philadelphia 76ers, just breaking within the last 15 minutes or so. So the 76ers get one of the hot commodities out there in the coaching world. I think this is, to the point of there are not a lot of hot takes with Nick Nurse.
That's true.
But what I think that you can figure out in this scenario is you have two teams in the Eastern Conference. And we're going to talk about the Heat and Celtics, but you have two teams that aren't too different from each other. They have superstar players. You're trying to figure out what's going to happen with their surrounding cast. There's changes that are likely going to be made. And it's what direction do you go from here? And I'm talking about the Bucks and the Sixers, who were the first team, the top team in the East, top team in the NBA. The Bucks were in the regular season. And Philadelphia came in as a 3 seed in these NBA playoffs and took the Celtics to 7 games. The Bucks being ousted by the Heat in the first round of the playoffs, even though Giannis was hurt, Aaron, it's kind of a signal of, all right, things just got to change here. The 76ers, on the other hand, had 2 opportunities to beat the Celtics and move on to the Eastern Conference Finals and couldn't get it done. So now you're kind of looking for a tweak here. And so the Bucks go with Adrian Griffin, not experienced with a head coach, but was Nurse's assistant in Toronto. He gets that job. Nurse then goes to Philadelphia. I don't think that the Bucks and Sixers are really that different from each other, but now in moving forward, it really feels like the Sixers are like, all right, we feel like we've got the pieces here. Even if James Harden ends up moving on and going back to Houston, if he stays, great, but we feel like we've got some pieces around Joel Embiid that we can maybe make a run. Let's go with a guy who's been there before to help us through it. Where the Bucks, I think, are kind of not hitting the reset button, but trying to hit the recharge button and going with someone maybe with fresh ideas that hasn't been in that spot before, trying to change things. I just think that they're two very similar teams. And even though they got coaches coming over from Toronto, I think that they signify 2 different ways of thinking as they move forward with their organizations with these 2 hires.
Well, you know the Bucks way better than I do in terms of what their thinking is, not only with this hire, but then also with their roster going forward. And I know outside of Giannis, they have some older players that are probably on the tail end of their primes or playable, whatever. Chris Middleton is about to be 32 here in a couple weeks. Brook Lopez is getting older, on and on. So I think the thing that stands out to me when you said about Philadelphia, a guy who's been there and done that before, my only issue with that, I don't agree with I don't disagree with what you said. My only issue is, wasn't that why you hired Doc Rivers 3 years ago, 2 years ago, whatever it was? Okay, we did the Brett Brown thing. He got us through the process, da-da-da-da. Now it's time to go get a guy with championship pedigree. And so to me, again, I'm not saying Doc Rivers is blameless for the situation in Philadelphia, but when you look at that Game 7 situation, when you did lose to the Boston Celtics, and you have a situation in that game where, look at, James Harden finished that game, what was he, 3 for 11, excuse me, Joel Embiid 5 for 18. Like, I can't, again, I don't want to be boring with my take, and I wish I had a hotter take, but I think it's about the 5 guys on the court more than it is the guy calling the shots. Is Joel Embiid, I know he's had the regular season accolades now, but is he going to step up when it matters in the playoffs? James Harden, can you get something consistent from him as he enters year 12, 13, 14, whatever it is? Does Tyrese Maxey make that leap? Is James Harden back? If he's not, how do you use that cap space for something else? It's not that I'm not excited to see how it plays out, but you already made the hire 3 years ago to bring in the guy with the championship pedigree. At some point, it does fall on the guys on the court.
I think what you're saying is fair, that it's now Joel Embiid's responsibility, just like it probably was Giannis's responsibility to take his team to the promised land. There do seem to be failings with Doc Rivers that are magnified, and so that goal of doing so in making a change, I think, is warranted. But we were just talking earlier, and we used Kawhi as the example in comparing him to Jimmy Butler. And like, look at what that title did. Look at what Kawhi has done. Kawhi has now allowed Nick Nurse to go and be picky about what head coaching jobs he wanted when he left.
Forever championship coach, right?
Yeah, yes, absolutely. Raptors the last 3 seasons have 1 first-round exit in the NBA playoffs to their name. And that may be about personnel and the pieces that they have there. Could very well be. But it's also just the point of what did Kawhi do? Kawhi brings them a championship, and now you look at the value of the players and what he's done with Nick Nurse has that on his resume. As he said, that's what he's going to be considered. And so when we criticize Kawhi, just remember what Kawhi has also done and has allowed. And he's now allowed Nick Nurse to maybe pick and choose his next stops, again, after having 1 playoff appearance in the last 3 years.
Yeah, and it is kind of interesting, to play devil's advocate. If they don't win that championship, then does Nick Nurse have a choice? Is he revered? Is this considered a smart hire? Are there multiple teams interested in his services, or is he just a guy that, let's just say the Kawhi Leonard trade never happens, period, and he doesn't win a championship, and he doesn't make the finals, and they lose in the semis or the Eastern Conference Finals like they had pre-Kawhi. Is he just now a guy that we're questioning, does he even deserve the second shot, let alone, oh my goodness, Nick Nurse, championship coach, he's the guy, got to put him over the top. So it's an interesting, push-pull, I guess. I
don't even think there's push-pull. I think you're right. I don't think he is. I don't think he is at all. I don't think that there's, the point about Embiid, and you can't change, you're not going to trade Joel Embiid. You've got Joel Embiid, and at some point he's going to be as far as, he's going to take you as far as he can. And at some point you just got to have to live with it. I think that's pretty true in a lot of the NBA. And I think that we see that, you can have the coaching, as much as you can have the best in the world, and it's only going to get you so far. It's going to come out in certain spots, but ultimately the players end up getting you over. What I think Philadelphia looks at is, again, we had 2 opportunities to knock off the Celtics to go to the Eastern Conference Finals, so we have these pieces. We've gotten to that point. Why can't we do it? To your point, Joel Embiid's got to play better in Game 6s and Game 7s. So that's what it's got to be. There, I think thinking is the minor adjustments that a Nick Nurse could make the difference for that team. But, yeah, ultimately, you got to have great players. There's been outside of the Pistons, and when you look back at the Pistons, you're just like, well, they actually just had a bunch of really good players. But you need great top-level teams, and I'm talking about the Pistons of the 2000 championship.
Wow, shots at Isaiah Thomas. We're going to talk about
not at all. I don't need Bill Laimbeer calling me. But it's just that, the Chauncey Billups, Rip Hamilton, Tayshaun Prince, Ben Wallace. That is a solid core. But are you going to say, are there any superstars on that team? No, you need your superstars to carry. And that's ultimately it's what's going to happen in Milwaukee. If the Bucks are going to have more success, whether Adrian Griffin or Nick Nurse or whoever's going to be the coach, and it's the same thing in Philadelphia. So I think you're absolutely right in saying that for as much of the moves and it looks flashy and everything, it still comes down to Joel Embiid coming up in the biggest times that they need.
I was going to ask, assuming the Celtics largely run it back, I don't care who's coaching them, but that Jaylen Brown is back with Jason Tatum. And obviously the Bucks are going to make moves, but Giannis is going to be kind of the centerpiece there. Do you think this changes the dynamics in the East at all? Because, again, even if James Harden comes back, it doesn't, in my opinion.
No.
Yeah.
It's funny because I thought the difference for the Celtics this year, I thought that just the addition of Malcolm Brogdon was going to just do them a world of good. And here he's been dinged up in the playoffs and didn't play in Game 6. Monty's saying that we're thinking we're going to get some Brogdon action tonight, but again, who knows how successful he can be. Their addition of adding him this offseason, to me, put them as the favorites again in the East, even after winning it and even after Milwaukee was the number 1 overall seed. I don't think it changes anything. Honestly, if James Harden leaves, I don't think it really changes too much with the Sixers.
That's how I feel.
Yeah, and I still think that they're going to be there. Maybe Tyrese Maxey takes it to the next level. So I don't crazy to like actually say it now that I'm hearing myself say it. But there's still going to be a contender. It's what you could get to fill around. And again, Harden could return to Philadelphia. And maybe Nurse is the guy to make that work there. But I don't think it changes, things too much. I think the Bucks have a really interesting offseason. But I don't think you're going to see too much change in Boston because I think they're going to win tonight. If not, different story. Then we can see different story. But I don't think it changes the power struggle that you've got atop the East right now.
If there's one saving grace too, I don't know how serious it ever got, but those early whispers of Mike D'Antoni, of course, with the Daryl Morey stuff. So at least we could put those to bed if you're a Sixers fan, and you don't have to worry about reliving history with D'Antoni and Morey and potentially James Harden as well.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, this adds even more pressure, I think, on Joel Embiid.
I agree, 100%, because and again, listen, I've said it 3 or 4 times. I'm not going to keep going there, but I think it's a collaborative effort in the loss. Like I just think if you go and look at, if you just go and look at, if there's a blame pie or a blame chart as far as who's to blame for what happened, not only in these playoffs, but really the last couple of years, I don't think it's all on Doc Rivers. And now, again, to this point, it's like, well, now, okay, you got the new head coach. Doc Rivers is out. I do think and again, it's kind of the same conversation we were having with Jokic coming into these playoffs. Okay, you're an MVP now. Now go out and prove it in the games that matter the most. And this has been a theme of today's show. We were talking about it with Jimmy Butler earlier. Is he that good, or does he get credit because he does it on the biggest stages? Well, now Joel Embiid, you've had that regular season success, could have been MVP last season, was the MVP this year. Now it's time to do it in the biggest games that matter the most. Yeah, the added pressure of the Embiid MVP. It was enough to make Joel Embiid need to step up his game. Now he's got to do it and back the new coach that comes into town.